You must stop running, Mother. You must let someone see the starlight in your eyes before it's too late.
My daughter's words were a fragile whisper, drifting through the sun-drenched air of a Victorian bedroom that smelled of lavender and old parchment. I stood behind the vanity, my fingers steady as I ran a silver-backed brush through a curtain of thin snow-white hair. My fingers moved through it with a slow, practiced care, brushing each stroke as though time itself might be soothed by my gentleness. "Hold still," I murmured. To the servants passing the door, I looked like a youthful goddess, a young woman of 27, in a cream lace morning gown, tending to her frail grandmother. But as I met the eyes in the mirror, the reflection told a story that the history books were too afraid to print. The woman in the chair, Ingrid, was my daughter. She was withered by a natural passage of 80 years. Her hair, once dark and thick, had been thinned into delicate strands of white. Her skin, a map of life fully lived, while I remained exactly as I had been on a frozen night in 1837. I leaned down, pressing my cheek against her wrinkled brow, feeling the terrifying heat of my own unaging skin against her cooling porcelain. "I cannot stay, Ingrid," I whispered, the ache in my chest sharper than any blade. "To love is to be found, and to be found is to be a specimen." "Mother," Ingrid's voice softened, but carrying something heavy beneath it. "You have lived long enough as a shadow in your own life." Her fingers tightened faintly against the armrest. "You hide in new names, new home, new faces. But your eyes," she swallowed, emotions pressing against the edge of her composure. "Your eyes have always carried the same starlight. Anyone who truly looks will see it." My gaze flickered in the mirror, staring at my reflection with something closer to ache. "You must let someone see you," Ingrid whispered, her voice breaking just slightly. "Not the woman you pretend to be, but the one you've buried beneath all the careful facade." A pause, long enough to feel like a lifetime. I turned, the corner of my eyes filled with tears and my voice slightly breaking. "Ingrid?" A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. We adjusted instantly, our marks sliding back into place with perfect precision. "Come in," I called out, my voice bright and melodic. Grandmother was just telling me about the spring of 42. It was a public lie we are told 1,000 times, a necessary deception to protect the miracle and the curse that had turned my life into a never-ending minute. The memory of how I became this ghost of time always returns to when the highland winds howl. It was 1837, a night when the Scottish sky seemed to split open during the Aurelian meteor shower. My husband and I were returning from a cocktail dinner. The air carried a faint scent of damp earth and a distant pine, a steady rhythm of carriage wheels coursing through the quiet like a heartbeat. I leaned back against the velvet seat, my laughter soft, lingering from something my husband had just said. He sat across from me, his glove resting loosely on top mine, his eyes warm with a familiarity that only love could shape. "You are certain you do not regret leaving so early?" he teased lightly. "Lady Weatherby will think of us terribly dull." I smiled, turning my gaze towards the window, where the darkness rolls past in soft, endless waves. "I would rather be dull with you than be brilliant with anyone else." He laughed at that, genuine, unguarded, and the sound filled the small carriage with warmth. Outside, the wind picked up. Then, without warning, light. A streak of gold tore across the sky, so sudden, so brilliant it felt almost unreal. I leaned forward. "Did you see?" Another followed, then another, and then the horses screamed. The carriage jolted violently to one side, wheels striking uneven ground. The driver shouted, the reins snapping taut. But the animals had already lost control, panic ripping through them beyond reason. "Hold on!" The heavens seemed to open, a spilling fragment of burning starlight into the world below. Panicked under a sky raining fire, I remember the smell of the ozone and the sudden violent lush as a star, a literal piece of the heavens, streaked downwards, striking the freezing waters of the Loch just as our carriage swerved into the abyss. The crash was a symphony of splintering wood and screaming iron. My husband was thrown clear, landing hard against the rocky shore, but I was claimed by the water. As I sank into the black, a streak of blinding gold tore through the darkness above, striking the surface of the Loch with a force that seemed to split the world in two. The water ignited in the abyss with light. Liquid starlight wrapping around me, threading through my veins, my very breathless form. At the exact microsecond my heart stopped beating. And in that silence, I died. But the starlight did not just revive me, it gilded me. When the rescuers pulled my body from the water, they called it a miracle. I gasped, my lungs seizing as the air rushed back into my chest, sharp and unforgiving. My body convulsed against the cold, water spilling from my lips as I forced to return back to something that no longer felt entirely familiar. Her husband, someone began quietly. I'm afraid he did not survive the fall. The words landed somewhere far away. I lay still, my gaze fixed on nothing, as though the world had shifted just slightly out of reach. And though my heart beat once more, it did not feel the same. A transformation had occurred that defied the laws of nature. The Aurelian energy had locked my cells in a state of permanent grace. Time is the enemy of beauty, but for Freya Blackwood, time was a thief of a different kind. Welcome, loves! Please watch this video to the end as we delve into the story, feel the passion and a lot of tension. Do not leave without giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. At first, I did not understand the price of the starlight. I waited for the wrinkles to appear at the corner of my eyes as I raised Ingrid, but they never came. I watched my friend's hair turn to silver, while mine remained as dark as the raven's wing. I was a perpetual widow of the world, a woman designed to watch everyone I love wither and vanish while I remained 27. As the decades passed, the whispers began. Neighbors looked at me with suspicion. To survive, I became an architect of disappearance. I learned to flee, changing my name and my life every 15 years, never staying long enough for the world to notice that my face was a lie. I made a silent, poetic vow to the stars that I would never let myself fall in love again, and I will not be bound to a place or a person, for to be loved was to be seen, and to be seen was to be haunted. For 4 decades, I lived as a shadow, a beautiful footnote in the histories that I alone remembered. By 1897, London was draped in industrial fog of Gilded Age, and I reinvented myself as Beatrice, a quiet restorer of ancient tapestries in the bowels of the British Museum. I spent my days mending the frayed threads of the past, finding comfort in the silence of the archives. But my quiet life was about to experience a traumatic change. It was at the luminous ball, under the flicker of 10,000 candles, that the trajectory of my frozen life shifted. Across the crowded ballroom, my eyes met those of Edgar. He stood with an ease that did not demand attention. His expression was so composed and yet observant. Seconds after our eyes locked, I looked away first. Of course, I had to. I spent a lifetime of perfecting the art of disengagement. A brief encounter, a polite smile, a step in another direction. Those were the things I understood. But something in me faltered that night, because moments later, he was standing before me. "Miss?" he prompted, his voice low and measured. "Beatrice," I replied, inclining my head just enough to remain cautious, without inviting familiarity. "Edgar Stone," he said, stretching his hands for a cautious handshake. The name carried weight. Even I, in my careful distance from society, had heard of it. He was a man of immense wealth and a quiet, magnetic grace, a renowned philanthropist who spent his fortune protecting beauty rather than trying to own it. Edgar did not approach me with the rehearsed flattery of a suitor. He looked at me as if he could see the old soul I had tried so hard to hide. He was captivated by the way I spoke of the 17th century, as if I had walked its streets. And he did not stop until he found me in my sanctuary. He did not just court me with flowers, he courted the mind I had cultivated over nearly a century. He arrived at the archives one afternoon with a shattered silk tapestry from 1650, a piece so delicate that no other restorer dared touch it. As we worked side by side in the dim amber glow of the library, our hands moving in a synchronized dance over ancient threads, he watched me with a look of profound reverence. He did not ask how I knew the exact lost stage of the Stuart era. He simply admired the muscle memory that seemed to flow from time before his own birth. One midnight, as we scrolled through a fog-laden London park, the old panic fled within me. I had felt myself falling, the flight response screaming in my mind as I realized I was becoming tethered to him. I began to pull away, my footsteps quickening towards the exit of the park. But Edgar stopped me under the haze of a gaslight. He did not beg. He simply took my hand and placed it over his own heart, the steady thrum of his life vibrating against my palm. "I am a man of stone and iron, Beatrice," he said, his voice low and unwavering. "But I am tethered to this earth only by the moments I spend with you. Stay for a minute. The hours will take care of themselves." In that moment, under the yellow glow of the London fog, the Starlight's widow finally stopped looking for the door. The intellectual connection we shared ignited into a profound soul-deep intimacy that I had denied myself for a lifetime. We retreated to the sanctuary of his private town home. I remember the warmth of the rooms, the quiet richness of mahogany and silk, the way the firelight softened everything it touched. I remember the moments his coat slipped from his shoulders and the muted weight of it against the floor, the soft sound of fabric as distance closed between us. That night, Edgar did not just claim my hand, he claimed the very rhythm of my heart. And in the warmth of his embrace, I felt the Aurelian Loch in my soul finally begin to soften. We became one another's sanctuary. A devotion so intense it felt as though we're the only two people left in the world that I finally stopped turning. It wasn't just a night of passion, it was a night of belonging. And for the first time in 60 years, I wasn't a ghost haunting the living. I was a woman, loved with a madness that made time itself felt irrelevant. When the sun began to peek through the heavy velvet curtains, I looked at Edgar and realized I could no longer run. I agreed to do the one thing that terrified me the most. I agreed to visit his family's ancestral estate, the Stone Haven. But I didn't know that by stepping into his world, I was walking straight into the arms of a ghost from my own past, a man who held one secret that could shatter the Starlight forever. The journey to the Stone Haven felt like a descent into a dream, the carriage wheels whispering against the gravel as we wound through a landscape where trees seemed to bow under weights of rain-soaked ivy. The air turned sharp and biting as we reached the terrace, a cold that had nothing to do with the Scottish mist and everything to do with the man standing on top of the marble stairs. Arthur Stone, Edgar's father. He was a silver-haired patriarch with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the entire 19th century. When our eyes met, the world did not just slow down, it stopped. I saw the color drain from his face, leaving him as pale as the statues in the garden. He looked at me as if I were a ghost that had stepped out of the grave and attempted to stay for 40 years. My heart, that frozen golden organ, hammered against my rib with frantic rhythm I hadn't felt in decades. "Father," Edgar said warmly, stepping forward. "May I present Miss Beatrice, the restorer from the museum." Beatrice, I thought. The name sounded distant, hollow, as though it had belonged to someone standing far behind me. "May I present my father, Lord Arthur Stone," Edgar said, his tone warm, unaware of the fracture opening beneath the moment. Arthur inclined his head with practiced courtesy. "Miss Beatrice," he said, polite yet measured, but there was something beneath it. Forgive me. Have we met before? Arthur's eyes did not leave mine. The question was gentle, but it was not casual. My breath caught as he took a single step closer, his gaze searching mine with a certainty that felt almost cruel in its precision. Freya? The name landed softly, yet final. Edgar still beside me. Father? But Arthur did not look at him. My God? How? How was this possible? He stammered. My pulse thundered in my ears. Oh, no, I said quickly with a frail laugh, the words slipping out before I could temper it. I lowered my gaze at once, forcing composure back to my voice. My lord, you are mistaken. That was the moment. The lie had to come now, or everything would collapse. My mother, I said, lifting my eyes again, though I could feel the tremor beneath the surface, was named Freya. The silence that followed was heavy. Arthur's expression did not change, but something behind it fractured. She bore a resemblance to me, my lord, I continued, shaping each word with precision. It has been remarked upon, more than once, by many people, if I do say so in fact. I finished, trying to dampen the tension with light amusement. His gaze moved over my face again, slower this time, as though searching for a flaw in the explanation, the place where it might all unravel. My mother, I added again, more softly, is no longer living. Arthur exhaled, though it carried something wounded. I see, he said at last. The resemblance is nothing like I've seen. I thought I might have seen a ghost from my past. My apologies, Miss Beatrice. He inclined his head slightly, the gesture returning to its proper, aristocratic form, masking the earthquake inside him. But his gaze remained haunted, tracking every movement as if waiting for the illusion to shatter. Edgar let out a quiet breath beside me, tension easing from him. That evening, the manor felt like a pressure cooker in unspoken history. After a dinner where the silence was so heavy it felt like a physical weight, we retreated to the drawing room. The moon was a sliver of ice in the sky, casting long, jagged shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Drawn by subconscious yearning I could not control, I found myself sitting on a grand piano, my fingers, possessed by a muscle memory that ignored in the passage of 40 years, they began to drift over the ivory keys. I played a hauntingly beautiful, ethereal melody, a waltz that didn't exist in any book of music. I did not realize what I was doing until I heard the soul-piercing sound of glass shattering on the marble floors. My hands stilled. Slowly, I turned. Arthur stood in the doorway, a glass lay broken at his feet, its content bleeding into the marble like something undone. His face had lost all color. Stop, he said, though his voice was merely more than a breath, silence falling between us, heavy and absolute. That piece, he continued, his gaze fixed on me with something no longer restrained. That piece was never written. My throat burned. Still, I said nothing. That melody was the waltz of the falling star. It was a secret piece of music Arthur had composed solely for me in 1860, played only once in a rowboat under a summer moon. He had never written a single note of it on paper, and in that moment, the daughter light did not just fail, it evaporated. The confrontation that followed in his private study was the most terrifying moment of my existence. The room smelled of old leather and bitter ink. Arthur didn't yell. His voice was a low agonizing gasp that cut deeper than any scream. He reached into the hidden compartment of his desk and pulled out a small silver locket, the very one I had left on his pillow the night I vanished. My son believes he has found a miracle, Freya, he whispered, his eyes swimming with a mix of grief and accusation. But I know I have found a tragedy. You haven't aged a day since that night you broke my heart. Look at me. I am now a man at the end of his road. And yet, you are still the girl I would have died for. He pulled a faded daguerreotype from a shelf, a picture of us together at a fancy dinner, me, looking exactly as I did now. He spoke of the pain of his first love, of the decades spent wondering why the woman he adored had never grown a day older. Edgar walks in just as his father delivered the final crushing blow. How can you love him, Freya? Knowing you will only ever be his beautiful shadow, giving him a love, knowing you will watch him wither? Edgar stood in the doorway, the shock on his face turning into a mask of pure unbelief. The man of stone and iron looked utterly broken as the reality of my curse settled in his mind. I couldn't breathe. I could not explain. The panic that had been my only companion for 60 years took over. I turned and fled, my silk skirts rustling like a warning through the dark hallways of the stone haven. I did not stop until I reached the stables, throwing myself into a carriage and demanding the driver fly towards the station. The storm began before I reached the edge of the estate. Rain struck the carriage roof in a sharp, relentless burst, the wind rising with a force that felt familiar. This is why, I whispered to myself, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. This is why you do not stay. This is why you do not love. Because love anchors, and anchors drown. The wheels struck uneven ground, the carriage jolting as the driver struggled to steady his horses. Easy, easy now, he shouted, but the storm had already taken hold. As the horses surged into the night, a violent storm broke over the estate, mirroring the celestial chaos of the night my life had stopped, the night I was made 27 forever. I huddled in the corner of the carriage, my daughter Ingrid's voice echoing in my mind. Stop running, mother. Let someone see the light in your eyes. I realized then that my vow of isolation hadn't been a shield. It had been a shroud, and I was tired of being a footnote. I was tired of being a ghost. The carriage was racing along the edge of a semi-frozen lake when a fallen branch, slick with rain, that laid hidden beneath the mud, caught in the wheels at an angle too sharp to recover from. The carriage lurched violently, one side lifting as the horses panicked, their screams swallowed by the roar of the storm. A bolt of lightning, sharp and electric, struck a massive oak tree, sending it crashing across the road. The driver screamed as the horses swerved, the carriage lurching violently before rolling down the embankments towards the icy water. The impact was a deafening roar of splintering wood. I was thrown from the vehicle, my body hitting the freezing mud as the cold of the water began to claim me once again. My heart slowed, the rhythm faltering as the hypothermia took hold. For a moment, I saw the Scottish Loch of 1837. I saw the falling star. I felt the starlight in my veins begin to hum, as if recognizing the end as my heart gradually came to a stop. Through the haze of a near death, I felt hands, warm, desperate human hands. Edgar had chased me through the storm, his horse lathered in foam as he reached the wreck. Freya! His voice broke through the water before the air did. He dragged me from the lake, his hands trembling as he pulled me against him, his breath uneven, frantic. Stay with me, he whispered, over and over, as though repetition alone could anchor me back to the world. Freya, stay with me. I do not care if I am withered by old age. I do not care about your youth. I only know that the moments I spend with you here on earth, till the day I draw my last breath, will make my life worth living. I love you. Please, stay. Wrapped in his gasping embrace, the only heat in a world of ice, as he held me, crying out my name, a second celestial flash, a sudden, vibrant return of the Aurelian stars illuminated the sky. It wasn't a strike of lightning this time, it was a release. I felt a strange, soft sensation within my cells, like a lock finally turning in a rusted gate. The golden energy that had gilded my life for nearly a century flowed out of me in a visible shimmering mist, returning to the heavens from which it came. The starlight was gone. The stillness within me changed. Time, which had once circled endlessly around me without touching, seemed to find its way back. and the clock began to tick again. I raised my head as I felt the warmth of life afresh flow through me. With a weak breath and sore lungs, I said, "I love you too, Edgar." 25 years passed, in what felt like a blink of an eye, yet every second was precious because it was finite. The year was 1922, and the world had changed beyond recognition, but the garden in our new home was a sanctuary of timeless peace. I stood before a silver mirror, the sun-drenched air of morning warming my skin. I reached up, my fingers no longer perfectly smooth, but possessing the elegant character of age, finding a single shimmering silver-grey hair at my temple. I leaned closer, tracing a tiny delicate wrinkle near the corner of my eye. It was a smile line, a permanent record of every laugh I had shared with Edgar. I didn't feel like a goddess anymore. I felt like a masterpiece that had finally finished. The heavy secret was gone, replaced by a beautiful, terrifying reality of mortality. Edgar walked into the room, his own hair now a distinguished white. He stepped slower, but his eyes filled with the same quiet reverence. He did not look at my youth, he looked at my soul. He stepped behind me, his hands resting on my shoulder. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, his voice thick with devotion that had only deepened with the graying of our hair. I laughed slowly, sounding light, unburdened in a way I'd once believed impossible. "Do I?" I asked. He leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to the faint line on the corner of my eye. "Yes, love." I looked at our joint reflection, two people who had conquered time not only by stopping it, but by walking through it together. I felt a tear of pure, unadulterated joy sliding down my cheek. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I wasn't a ghost haunting the living. I turned in, his arms pressing my face against his chest, feeling the steady mortal thrum of his heart against my own. "I am finally part of the story, Edgar," I whispered, my voice thick with the beauty of the end. "I am finally, beautifully fading with the sun." He looked at me intensely, tears gathering around the corner of his eyes as he held my hands, and we made our way through the halls, outside, down the gardens, to visit Ingrid's grave, the true heroine that helped me find my way back to love and mortality. If you made it to the end of this video, you're officially a member of the House of SIBU. So tell me, if you're offered the chance to stay at your peak forever, but the price was being a silent observer of history and life, would you take the Starlight? Or would you choose the grey and the heart that eventually stops? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and feel free to join our house by subscribing to this channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.